No.
Good morning, Boker Tov. Welcome to everyone. I think I know everyone in the room, but I'm Marcy Lidman. I'm a member of the Israel Committee at Temple Emunah, as is Paul who's working with us. And I also want to introduce Eyal and Yael Devere, who are the co-chairs of the Israel Committee. And I want to welcome you, and I want to share some welcome from Barbara Posnick, our president, who says, "Friends, I'm sorry I'm not able to be with you today as I'm on my way to Florida to spend time with my mother. In conversations with other synagogue presidents and with visitors to Temple Emunah, I've heard about synagogues that have decided that dialogue about Israel is too difficult and divisive, so they don't talk about Israel. I've heard of other synagogues where there seems to be one set of views about Israel that is acceptable, and people holding other views feel unwelcome or ostracized. I'm very proud that at Temple Emunah we place a high value on our relationship to Israel, and that we have so many opportunities to learn about Israel and deepen our connections to our homeland. We also understand that we have differing views about Israel's circumstances and political solutions. Although challenging at times, we welcome a wide range of opinions, and we have tried diligently to maintain respect for each other in our conversations about Israel. I see the constructive conversations about Israel as taking this a step further, providing a structure through which we can listen even more closely and open-mindedly to the views of others with whom we may not agree, and have a chance to have our views heard. May our love for Israel, openness, and mutual respect carry us through this process. Thank you to Paul Neustadt, Marcy Lidman, Yael Devere, and Eyal Devere for organizing and facilitating this program, and to all of you for participating. I look forward to joining you in this important endeavor. Barbara Posnick. So I wanted to share that. And before we kick off and I introduce Paul, it would be great, since we are creating a chevra, a community, it would be great if we all knew who's in the room. So I never start, you're going to start, I'm going to start with Mark in the back, and if you could just introduce yourself slowly as we go through.
Hi, I'm Mark.
Hi. I'm Nicholas Cook.
Ruth Anderson.
Eric Austin.
Fred Ezekiel.
Keila Appleby.
Paul Turner.
Barbara Neustadt. Jean Cantor.
Mark Cantor.
Toby Grossman. Lena Edmondson. Elizabeth Pressman. Joel Duncan.
Everybody's.
Miriam Sidman.
Eyal Devere.
Stan Wolf.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm going to turn the program over to Paul Neustadt. We are very fortunate to have Paul facilitating this process. Paul has been a psychotherapist for many years, and he's been involved with the Public Conversations program. It's a method that we are using for this process to have dialogue about things about which we maybe feel challenged. And I feel very fortunate to be learning from Paul in this context.
Thank you.
Just one thing, the program is being videotaped for those who are not here. However, you see it's only pointed this way, so you won't be filmed. Paul will be repeating questions so that the people on the tape can hear it. Okay?
And remind me to repeat the questions if I forget, because I might. So hi, I'm Paul Neustadt, and I'm really happy to be here and to be sharing this process with you. I really appreciate Barbara's introductory letter, because I think she really captures why we're here today. I think everyone who is here because we do have a real love for Israel, a really strong connection to Israel, and concerns about Israel. I think it's important. Probably another reason you're here is because it's important to us to be able to share our concerns with other people, and I think, maybe many of us have experienced that sometimes it's hard to share our concerns. It's hard to feel safe to share our concerns, because sometimes we don't know how other people feel, and sometimes people have disagreements, and so it's very easy, in my experience, for sharing our concerns to suddenly become a disagreement. an argument, and to change the atmosphere in such a way that people start to feel like, well, maybe it's not safe. I can't really talk about this here. So I think there are a lot of people who really hold back from sharing their feelings and their concerns because of that concern that it's not going to be safe to talk about. So we really wanted to provide an opportunity for people to be able to talk honestly about how you feel about Israel. What are your concerns about Israel, and feel like it is safe. It is safe, even with people who might strongly disagree with you. I guess we want to create an atmosphere where everybody feels like, you know what, we're family. You know, we're all connected. Our connection with each other is really transcends our differences about Israel, and so among family, it's okay. It's okay for us to have differences and to respect our differences and share our concerns with each other. I came to this because I've known about this program, Public Conversations Project, for many, many years. They created a model for dialogue back in the 1980s when the abortion issue was such a huge issue in the Boston area. It was a time when there were the shootings at the abortion centers, and the intense hatred really from one side to the other have really escalated. So this group created a model for dialogue, and they brought together leaders from both sides, pro-life and pro-abortion. They brought the two sides together, and they met with leaders from both sides and with this dialogue model for a year. And at the end of that time, they had a news conference, and leaders from both sides talked about what this model had done for them. And basically what it did is it made them friends. It made them feel really connected to each other. They didn't necessarily change their mind. They didn't, people who were pro-life were still pro-life. People who were pro-abortion, pro-choice were still pro-choice. But it de-escalated the tension between the two sides. And so they didn't exacerbate their differences as much. They didn't do things to escalate the differences between them. And they continued to have more of a dialogue, to stay open to the possibility that maybe they could learn from each other and moderate their positions a little bit. So this project has continued to facilitate dialogue over many, many different, very huge conflicts around the world. And so I thought it would be good to use this model to talk about Israel. And so that's where this comes from. So what I'd like, hopefully you all have handouts. Did everyone get handouts as you came in? If not, there are more. Raise your hand and we can hand them out to you. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this handout so that the purpose today is to make sure you understand this process, that you know what you're getting yourself into. One thing I want to say is we had initially thought we really wanted to make sure that people could come on both dates. There are 2 dates where the dialogue process is happening. And it turns out there are a number of people who can't make it to both dates. We decided we didn't want to turn people away. The idea of 2 dates is that you get deeper into the process. So you get to a certain point the first time, and the second time you can go even deeper. So that we thought that would be good. But if you can't be there for both, you can still get benefit. It can still be valuable even if you just come once. So we are going to make it possible for people to come just once if that's all you can do. So just wanted to let you know that, and if other people you know have that concern, let them know. Anyway, we're going to go through this handout together, and if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to raise your hand and ask any questions, and I'll try to remember to repeat your questions. Okay, so first of all, as we go through this, we're looking at what's the purpose of this? Why are we doing this? So we want to provide an opportunity for members of Emunah to have a calm and respectful conversation about our relationship with Israel. Okay, so we're talking about making it calm and respectful. So that gets to the idea of making it safe. Okay, so the idea is if we can keep it calm and respectful, it's safer. And then if it's safer, people might have a chance to really say, this is how I feel. And know that people are going to listen. Okay, the goal is that we really listen to each other, rather than I'm already preparing how I'm going to react to you. You know, I'm already preparing my counter-argument. Instead, we want to create an atmosphere where we're actually listening to each other. That's the goal, actually to listen. So we can so part of this is we want people to have a chance, because when I get to talk about Israel and also listen to other people, I'm expecting that I'm going to get clearer about how I feel myself. The chance to say it out loud gives me a chance to actually clarify how I feel. So that's one goal. It's going to actually help me get clearer. And I really am interested in understanding how other people feel. Both because I'm curious, you know, why do people feel differently than I do? But also maybe there is something I still have to learn from other people. Maybe I will change my mind some if I get a chance to really listen to what other people have to say. So, but the goal really is understanding. It's not to change each other's minds about Israel. It's really to understand each other. And then an additional goal is that maybe out of this process, by going through this process, we might learn something that enables us to continue to have conversations with each other. And so we're going to get to that, some of the skills that we hope you'll learn through this process. Any questions so far? Okay. So then there's a particular structure that we're going to use to enable us to do this. And so first of all, there are guidelines, and we'll get to that, but there are guidelines, and we ask you to agree to the guidelines. And then, so the dialogue will take place in groups of 5 to 8 people. So we'll divide up, we'll have tables, and so there'll be small groups. So the conversations will take place in small groups, and each group will have a facilitator. We're going to start with a series of questions. There'll be 4 questions that everybody gets to answer. So you will go around in a circle. Everyone has a chance to reflect a little bit. You get a chance to think a minute, like how do I want to answer this question? And then everybody will have an equal amount of time. The facilitator will be keeping time, and everybody will have the same amount of time to answer those questions. The questions are designed so that people talk about your own experience, your own feelings, rather than taking positions. The goal, the idea is not so much this is what I believe, and this is why I believe it, but more like this is where my concern about Israel comes from. So, for example, if my concern is and we could talk. There are a range of things you could talk about. You might want to talk about the lack of pluralism around, Orthodox, conservative, reform, and that might be the thing you most want to talk about. And rather than say, I think Israel really needs to change its laws, and this is, you might say, I'm worried that. The dominance of the Orthodox in Israel is changing the nature of Israel so much that I'm not comfortable. So you're more sharing your concern about something rather than trying to convince us that Israel needs to change in a particular way. Is this making sense? Okay. Okay. So after 4 rounds of responding. to these questions that we're coming up with ahead of time, then we're going to open it up for people to ask each other questions. So that's a point where you get to come up with questions that you have. What are you curious about? What would you like to know about how other people think or feel about Israel? So we'll have a period of time where you ask a question, and the question might be for someone in particular, like you heard someone say something and you'd like to understand it better, or the question might be for the whole group. You know, how do people feel about such and such? And then other people have a chance to answer that question. And then after that, there's another round where people get to just share anything that they want to say that they feel is important at that point to share with the group. Any questions about the structure so far? Okay, yes, Mark.
The time constraint, it seems like there's an awful lot on that plate to do, and it's only a limited amount of time. I don't know how if anybody planned out or thought about how to fit all this in. It sounds like it's going to overrun the time limits and so.
Yeah, Marvin, thanks. Great question. That is a great question. So Marvin asked, there seems like a lot to do, and how do we fit it all in the amount of time that we have? It seems like a lot to do in the amount of time that we have. So yes, so the structure is designed to have people be very concise, very brief in your answers. So for example, the first round, you're going to have 1 minute to reflect on the question, and well, actually only 1 minute to answer. So you need to give a very brief answer. The second round, you'll have 2 minutes to reflect on the question, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer. So in order to get through all these questions, there are time limits that make sure that it's very brief. We want to make sure we get to the time where it's more open, where people get to come up with their own questions and share their own thoughts and feelings. So yes, there's a lot of attention to the time limits, and we're asking people to keep to those time limits so that we can get through it all. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll go on. So again, I talked about that there's skills that we hope that you're going to learn from this process that you'll get to use just, when you're having a conversation more informally. So the first one is holding on to the goal of understanding. So if I remember that my goal here is to understand other people rather than convince them, I think that changes the tone of the conversation right away. I've noticed, and myself personally, a lot of times if I hear someone say something that I strongly disagree with, my initial reaction is, like some part of me comes up and reacts very strongly, like, wait, how can you think that? No, this is the way you should be thinking. And I immediately come up with a part of me that wants to respond, just react. But if I remind myself, wait a minute, that's not going to help. That's not going to get us anywhere. Maybe what I need to do is just try to understand that person a little bit better. Why do they feel that way? Why are they thinking that way? So let me try to just understand them first. Before I respond, let me try to understand. So I think that immediately begins to shift the conversation. So that's one thing, is to learn, like, let's focus on understanding rather than convincing. The second skill, notice your reactivity and shift to curiosity. So that's really, I just really basically talked about that. We all tend to react very quickly sometimes. There's things that people say or do that really trigger us. And so we want to notice that we're getting triggered, and instead of just react with it, kind of hold back our reactivity, and just try to remind ourselves, wait a minute, let me be curious instead of reacting. Okay, so that's part of that same one. Number 3, notice when you make assumptions and check them out. So Is there anybody here who doesn't think you do that? Make assumptions about people that maybe turn out to be wrong? Because I know I do, right? I mean, I think that's something we all do. It's all human beings. We tend to make assumptions. We hear something, somebody say something, and immediately we start making assumptions about that. Well, then they must think this, or they must be like this, you know. So that's another thing that's not helpful in a conversation, is to just be making assumptions. So we want to notice, when am I making an assumption, and can I check it out? Can I ask a question that will check out whether I'm right about in this assumption that I'm making? Number 4, stay calm even when you feel passionately about something. This is a tough one. This is a really tough one, because it's not like we're telling you not to feel passionately about something. You feel passionately. You're going to feel passionate. So we're not trying to tell you to totally dampen your passion. It's just that at the same time you feel passionate, it is possible, I believe, to maintain a certain amount of calm along with your passion, so that you're not totally driven by the passion. Like you can express the passion, but you do it in a way that is holding on to some of these other intentions. The intention to, say something in a way that is going to be respectful, say something in a way that helps people understand you. So it's just maybe moderating the passion just a little bit. Number 5, reflect about your own feelings and values and speak about them succinctly. So, another thing that can happen is when we start talking about something, sometimes maybe we go on too long, and people have a hard time. They sort of lose their ability to really listen and pay attention because they're too busy thinking about the first 2 things I said, but then I keep going, and I keep going and going and going, and I start to lose people. So this is a really important skill, I think, in a conversation, is to try to be brief. Like, just say 1 or 2 things at a time. Let people really take in that 1 or 2 things, rather than just keep going on and on and on. Part of that is being clear myself what's most important to think of that I want to say. And so that's one of the reasons we ask people to reflect before you respond, is to ask yourself, well, what is most important to me? What is it that I really want to get across to people? So if you ask yourself that question, give yourself a minute to just say, what do I really want to say? Then maybe you can be clearer and you can be briefer, and then people have an easier time listening and taking it in. The next skill is asking people a question that will actually deepen the conversation, deepen your understanding. My experience is that we don't learn how to ask questions. Asking questions, it turns out, is really not an easy thing to do. I don't know, that's my experience. I'm curious if anybody else has a different experience, but I think we have a hard time, how do I ask a question that will help somebody explain themselves better, rather than, a question that is just trying to express my own point of view, like you're using a question to say something rather than to really ask. So it really actually takes practice to learn how to ask a good question that gets someone to share more about themselves. So that's another thing that you'll get to practice in this. Okay, any questions about any of that so far? Yes?
Minor suggestion, respectfully. Could you change the word a respectful dialogue to a respectful multi-logue? There's a monologue, dialogue, and a multi-logue.
Fred, I like that. Yes.
I just looked it up in Google.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, could we change the word from dialogue to multi-logue? And good point, because really we're trying to open this up to multiple points of view, not just two. Dialogue would be two, right? So yes, I appreciate that because yes, we're going to be in a group of like 5 to 8 people, and we're going to have, everybody's going to have their own perspective. It's not going to be just two sides to this. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, anybody else have a question? Yes.
Some thinking about the listening skills, it caused me to realize that maybe I didn't understand something you said about the structure. In the first round, for example, the questions asked, everybody has 1 minute to think about it, and then people comment or whatever, a minute at a time, or after each person's comment, there's a minute for the next person to think about it before they...
Okay, great. Thank you, Paul. That's a good question. So the question is, in the first 4 rounds, just to get clear about how that works. So the way it is we give you the question. Then you have 1 minute. Everybody has a minute to reflect on their answer. And actually, we're going to suggest that you make a few notes about what you want to say, so you don't have to try to like hold on to it, you know. And then we go around in a circle, and everybody, for the first question, everybody will have 1 minute to respond. So you've already had your chance to reflect at the beginning, and then we're just listening. Like, so each person has a turn to talk, and we're just listening to each other. We're not responding at that point to what someone said. We're just listening to what everyone said. So then the second round, we give you the question, 2 minutes to reflect on it, and then everyone has 2 minutes. We take turns to go around and answer. So we're not at this stage, we're not responding to what other people said. We're just responding to the question. The goal of this is just to begin to create an atmosphere of listening to each other, and everybody has the same chance. And then once we've created this atmosphere of feeling like, okay, I can be honest, I can say what I feel, people are just listening, then we make it a little bit more spontaneous, a little bit more open to people just coming up with questions, and we're not timing it as carefully. Is that clear? Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
As a follow-up, when you get to the round where individuals ask questions, I think that's where it gets a little less clear how it proceeds. Does the group each respond to each member's question, or is there some other structure?
Yeah, okay, great question. So the question is, once we get to the round of questions, more open questions, how does that work? So the facilitator will call on people. So let's say I have a question. The facilitator calls on me, and so my question might be for just one person. Like I say, Ruth, I heard you say such and such earlier, and I'm curious, could you help me understand that a little bit better? You know, why did you say such and such, or where did that come from that you believe that, or something like that. So I might just ask you a question, and you have a chance to respond to my question. Or I might ask a question of the whole group. So I might say something like, you know, I'm really wondering, you know, are there people who feel like you're, you know, some of the current conflicts in the United States between different candidates, has that influenced your feelings about how American Jews should, you know, be acting in regard to Israel? You know, so I have a question. I'm curious how something has affected other people in the group. And so anybody who wants to answer could answer that question.
Are there time limits on those answers?
So there aren't strict time limits. We just ask people to be brief. So whoever's facilitating the group might remind people, please be brief. You know, if someone's going on for a while, they might interrupt you and say, thank you very much for what you're sharing, but please wrap it up so that other people have a chance to respond. Yes?
So what's the objective here, Paul? Is the objective that we all, using your example of the people who were pro-life and pro-choice, that they didn't change their views, but apparently they got along a little bit better? Or is the idea that the congregation is going to have, nobody's going to change anybody's mind very much, but we'll get along better together? Or are we actually out to learn something?
Okay, thank you. So the question is, what really is the goal here? Is it just to understand each other? Is it not to change each other's mind? Is it just so we get along better? Do we really want to learn something? So again, thank you for asking that question, so we really get clear about this. Yeah, I would say the goal is primarily to deepen our understanding of each other. It's not to change each other's minds. Now, some of us might feel that we do change the way we think some. I mean, my experience is that when I really open myself up to listening and understanding where other people come from, then I'm changed by it. I do learn something that might actually make a difference to me, but that's not, changing other people's minds is not the goal. The goal is understanding. The goal is that people feel they don't have to hold back their feelings here. That Temple Muna feels like a place where I can talk to other people about when something worries me. I have a deep worry and concern about Israel. I want to feel like I can talk about it with other people and not feel like people are going to get angry at me and start attacking me and criticizing me. I want to feel like my views are okay. It's okay to bring it up here. So the creating an atmosphere in our congregation, that's one goal. You know, that it's an atmosphere where we're all welcome with our different views. And the other is deeper understanding. Does that answer the question?
Sort of. I'm not sure. I think you said yes to both. I think that's what your answer was. Yes, we want to get along better, and yes, we want to understand, have a better understanding of the issues that face American Jews in terms of their dealings with social, political, economic, and other kinds of issues related to Israel. But the second one is much less important than the first. That's what I thought I heard you say.
Okay, well let me. So what Harvey is saying is he's still not entirely clear from my answer that is how important is deepening the understanding. You're not sure how important that piece is, or the changing people's minds.